Okay, so welcome to Introduction to Digital Photography for OLLI for summer of 2020. This is the third meeting of the class. I'm your host, Rick Hearn. You can see up on the screen every Friday from 10:30 to 11:30 dates.
10 to 11:30.
Good point, 10 to 11:30. And that was the voice of my conscience, otherwise known as my wife, Sue. Okay, we have, in the first 2 weeks, covered what you guys would like to get out of the class, and that the direction that I'll take in the class, by and large, is to have you look at the world, see something that seems worthy of being photographed, try to imagine what sort of photograph you want to end up with for what you're seeing, and then use your camera and the skills that you get from this class to capture an image that, fortunately, hopefully, will be aligned with what you were trying to get. And that if you succeed the first try, fantastic, move on, take another picture, or go on enjoying your day. If you don't, critique the picture, consider how it fell short of what you were hoping for in your mind's eye, consider what techniques you have to come closer, moving the camera, changing the light, telling the subject to stand differently if they're a person, lots of possibilities. And that's the general technique. We were not going to primarily talk about camera controls with lens openings and shutter speeds and sensitivities, because that's not as fruitful a path for people who are at an introductory level in their photographic experience. Okay, let's get our new person who hasn't visited us in the previous 2 weeks to introduce herself and say what she likes to photograph and what she'd like to get out of the class. So, Bonnie, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us what you like to photograph and what you'd like to get out of the class.
Bonnie Sheeby, obviously. And what I noticed I just love to photograph just about anything you can find. What I would like to do is make better, not photographs, but not snapshots, but make photographs. I took a picture of a couple hummingbirds that were here by the house, and the babies looked fine to me. But then when I compared them with the other photographs out there, they looked really, really amateur. And I'd like to get rid of that amateur stuff and make it look more and more professional, because it was a great picture. And I like to make pictures with feeling in them. So even when I take pictures on vacation or whatever, it tickles me. We were in Yellowstone and getting pictures of the bull bison cutting the female bison from the herd because they were falling in love. Things like that are, to me, wonderful, wonderful pictures. So it seems like I really like to have things with emotion in it. I went through several lives of various monarchs, from egg to flying butterfly. Wow. Just by being out in the backyard and taking pictures of them. So, and they were wonderful, but they were snapshots. They weren't marvelous photographs. So that's what I want. Did that make sense?
Sure, absolutely. This is making me think of a resource that I wanted to mention to you guys anyway. That is the OLLI Focus Photo Club. I know that Shen has come to a couple of the monthly meetings. Last time I left you guys with a suggested photographic assignment of shooting something outside in different kinds of light. early morning, midday, late afternoon, or Sue did a neat picture this morning in the rather cloudy, overcast light that we had at that time. The sun has come out since then. So let's see if any of you are okay with sharing what you got, trying to do that. In Bonnie's case, I'm not going to grade you down for not having done the homework assignment, so don't worry. Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, we see it now.
Okay.
Wow.
So this was there. I have to go backwards, but because I took the morning ones today. So this was at 7:35 in the morning today. So it was pretty overcast.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Then this one is also same time, different view of the lily. These are calla lilies. No,
Mhm.
yeah, no, not calla. I can't think of the name of them. This is also a morning one.
Canna.
Canna.
They're either callas or cannas, and I
That's
never
a
can
canna.
remember which is
That's
which.
a canna. I'm getting. Could I go back and start in the order that I took them? They won't be in order of day, but it's easier for me. So there are
Great.
two of them. This one and this one were from 10:43 yesterday. Then these are from about 2:28 yesterday. So fuller sun. 4 of them.
Ooh.
The next 4 are at 6:30 p.m.
Uh-huh.
And then the last 4 are 7:30 this morning.
okay. All right. Anybody in the group want to comment on what they like best, how they look different from each other?
So you had more sun, but it was morning.
Yes, it was morning. It was 10, let's
Okay.
call it 10:40, 10:45.
Okay.
So 1, 2. These were in the morning.
Okay,
So,
one piece of comment on these
Yeah.
first two
Mm-hmm.
is that the first one is more appealing
Mm.
in one way to me because it doesn't have that blown out sky in it, okay?
Mm.
This one has pretty nice tones through the whole image.
Mm-hmm.
The other one, like a number of the other pictures, has bright sky in the background that is enough brighter than the lily that when the camera exposed to get a good exposure of the lily, the sky went to pretty close to featureless white.
Mm.
You know, and that featureless white sky is not a pleasing feature of a photograph to my personal aesthetic.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
yeah. So
Mm.
this is sunny, but not real bright light,
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
there's a difference.
which is
difference-
nice color.
Yeah, the difference really is of angle here, okay? This is taken from the lily's eye view with the camera held horizontal,
Right.
where the next shot is taken from below the lily's eye and therefore has some sky in the background.
Mm.
And the sky is a light shade of gray without any texture that I can see, at least on my iPad screen. It maybe there's some texture in it when you look at it on your device.
No, you're right. It actually looks totally white. There's no color to the sky at all.
Yeah, as a general statement,
Mm.
you don't want large areas of bright, no texture stuff in your images because they grab your attention and they're not saying something helpful to what you wanted to say by capturing a picture of the subject. Okay, let's go on.
Okay. Then these are about 2:30 in the afternoon, the next 4. So this one, and then this one, it's the same time, that one, and this one.
Okay, group, do you have any feedback as we're going along here?
Joanne, what camera did you use?
It's just a point and shoot, a Canon point and shoot. I don't use any settings or anything. I just point and shoot with automatic settings.
Okay.
I did do some cropping on these, but nothing else.
Okay. Any other comments?
I have a comment about this one. I don't like this in the back, this gray. It's very distracting. I didn't realize I was taking a picture of it, but it came out in a few of them, and it's not a good look to me.
Is
Yeah,
that
it's a
electric
telephone
pole?
pole. That's
I think it's a utility
Uh-huh.
pole.
It is.
Yeah.
I'll take the
Utility
opportunity.
poles are dreadful photo bombers.
Yeah.
They'll sneak into anything.
The
And I
comment that
think-
I make in the class every time is that the way people with their brains and their eyes see causes the utility pole to be invisible when you're looking through the viewfinder.
Yes.
You just don't notice it. It's not part of what's important to you of
Mhm.
seeing what's in front of you. The camera with its sensor, on the other hand, considers the utility pole to be an equal source of pixels to anything else.
Mm.
And when you turn a 3-dimensional world into a 2-dimensional image with the camera, distracting stuff behind the subject really
Shows up.
So hopefully over the time of the class, you will gradually start to imagine a 2-dimensional photograph
Mm.
when you're still looking through the viewfinder, and gradually start to notice the utility pole that's there behind the subject. But before that happens, what I would hope you'll do is, after you take the picture and before you move on to the next piece of your life, look at the picture on the back of the camera or through the viewfinder, depending on whether your camera can show you the pictures that you've already taken through the viewfinder. And you will immediately notice the utility pole,
Mm.
and you'll have the opportunity to change your vantage point in shooting the picture. Move yourself a little bit left, right, up, down, whatever it takes to get that distracting object that's right behind the subject to not be there in the frame at all, or at the very least not be directly behind the subject.
Mm.
So that happens to all of us, and I'm glad that we have an example that lets me.
I think that having the flower fill the frame almost totally is so much more appealing. And the other thing is, when you've got those darker leaves behind it, it does let the flower pop more, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's go backwards a shot or two. Yes, okay. This is a different kind of a picture, and I wouldn't say either this picture or the one where the flower fills the frame is innately better. They're two different compositions, and this one really, I like it because the lily is both very different in color and shape and texture and brightness from those lovely leaves that are in the lower portion of the image. So both images are valuable. I wouldn't throw either one out of bed for eating crackers. But you can frame in very tightly on your subject, and that's a legitimate picture of the subject. Or you can move back and put some interestingly context-setting things around the subject. And in this case, these leaves are just plain pretty, but also make an interesting contrast in all those dimensions I listed of color, texture, brightness, shape from the lily itself. Am I making any sense, guys?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
so both good compositions, just different.
Then going forward, I think this is later in the day. I'm not sure. I've lost track of the times exactly. Then there's that utility pole again. Yeah, it looks really bad in this one. I like the flower, but the utility
Yeah.
pole is terrible.
Actually,
The-
there's one other path you can take, which is if you like the picture enough to justify spending a few minutes on the computer in your image editing program, you could actually clone out the utility pole. In this case, given that you noticed the utility pole when you were still there, it's a better investment of your time to recompose the shot to get the pole out of the picture than it is to edit it out with cloning tool after the fact.
You've got some nice bright light on it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Particularly you're getting some backlight, which
Yeah,
I like a lot in pictures of plants.
you notice that this image, this is the first one I think in the group where the lighting has gone such that the area in the lower right behind the lily is quite dark. And I think in this case, that's a good thing. You can make the subject stand out from the background with the subject being in focus and the background being out of focus. You can also make the subject stand out from the background by having the background be sufficiently darker that you don't portray a great deal of detail in it. And it becomes, in the fancy term, negative space in the composition. But I like that you have the contrast between the popping bright reds and yellows of the lily and the very dark, lacking in detail area below and to the right of it. Do the rest of you agree or disagree with my taste there?
Oh, I agree.
Call on somebody, Rick.
Maria?
Oh, I said that I do agree. I mean, having those different shades, I personally, when I take pictures, I don't know how the outcomes will be. But like in this particular case, if I took this picture, I'd be happy with kind of like some of the brighter and then the less intense colors, because there's a little shadow. And I think if it weren't for that, for the wires and that post, I think this, I don't mind having that blue sky over there.
Yeah, in this case, you can see some differentiation between blue and cloud in the sky, and that's a definite plus versus it being featureless white. Okay, great. Thank you.
This one, now these I believe are the morning. Well, I'm not sure, but
Yeah, now if you were to contrast this picture with the one about 2 or 3 back that also had the leaves, very different look of the picture because of a different angle of the light. In this case, the sun is on the far left side of the lily. Okay, the light is coming down from top left. And the sun is on the far side of the subject from the camera. That's causing the translucency of the plant to come into play. Particularly the green leaves are showing their internal structure because of the bright light on the far side of them. Shooting with the light source behind the subject doesn't generally work well with people because people are opaque. But with vegetation, and I don't mean just that they're opaque, like I can't remember how to stop the screen share on my machine. With vegetation, having the light come through the flowers and leaves can be very attractive. And this picture makes that point. It's a roughly similar composition to the one about 3 pictures back, but it's very different because of having backlighting. Okay.
So this is also that same time you can see the light on the leaves.
Very nice.
Oh, that's the Galapagos, different subject.
Okay.
Didn't mean to include that.
All right. Does anybody else have something further to say about Joanne's photographs of the lily?
Yeah, I like the one with the backlight on the leaves with the green, different shade of green shows up.
Okay, very good. I do too.
Thank you.
If you back up
Hmm.
one more,
Ah.
well, maybe not.
No, can't do it.
Yeah, when you
It's
get to
okay.
the last one, it doesn't want to let her go.
No,
Never
it
mind. I was going to basically ruin the picture for you by suggesting that there's a face in the flower. You'll never be able to look at it again.
Okay. All right.
Sorry.
All right. Do you want to say anything else about these, Joanne?
No, thank you
Okay.
all for your comments, though. They're helpful.
Very,
The
very good.
different light is very interesting on these flowers, on this flower, because you get the bright popping yellows and oranges, or you get something that's a lot more muted, just by where the light is, how the light is hitting it.
That's true.
While we have this shot on screen, I will comment that this involves comparing the yellows and reds of the lily to the greens of the leaves in the hedge plant behind it. And that's good. You could take a picture in this same light from this same vantage point and make an adjustment on the camera so that the lily was in focus and the green leaves behind it were out of focus. Would that be a better picture or a worse picture or just a different picture? I think the answer is it would be just a different picture, but if you want the lily to be more dominant in the viewer's viewing of the picture, getting the background not as sharply focused as the lily would be a way to do that. Am I making any sense here?
Yes.
Yeah.
I like this one, regardless of the background. Somehow the color of the flower seems to be showing more 3D to me. Seems to have a depth by looking into the center, the hole between the petals going into the stems. If we can take the picture vertically, cut off much of the leaf of the background, I think that would be wonderful.
Yeah, that's something that I have not mentioned, but Shen, you make a very good point that it's really easy to take both a horizontal and a vertical composition of the same subject. And if you end up throwing one of them away immediately, you end up with the picture that you like better. when we were shooting film, we tended not to be willing to take a bunch of extra shots of the same thing with small variations, because it multiplied the cost by whatever number of pictures you took to take several pictures. That's not true with digital. And you know, what Shen says is very true here, that it would be tempting to take a very similar picture to this, but with the camera rotated 90 degrees, you'd get less of the hedge at the sides, and for better or for worse, you'd get more of the lily at the top or the bottom. So experiment with both horizontal and vertical shots of the same subject. It doesn't cost you very much time. It doesn't cost you any money to try both. And you may like both, you may hate both. You may just feel that they are different from each other, but neither one's stronger. Or you may find, wow, for this particular subject, the vertical composition really worked out. But it's a real good investment of just an extra moment of your time to try both the horizontal and vertical composition of the same subject. Good suggestion, Chen.
I agree with that, definitely. When I travel, I do that to make sure that I've gotten the best shot of something, because you don't really have any other chances.
Right.
So I try to take vertical, horizontal, zoom in, stay out, as many as possible.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Still not quite sure how Zoom works. Okay, this was this morning in the overcast light. This was in bright daylight. It was actually about 2:30 in the afternoon.
There's a challenge here that, can you go back for just a moment, Sue?
Sure.
We haven't talked about it, but one of the features that you guys are using in these pictures is letting the camera choose the focus point, or so-called autofocus. And most of the time it works out just fine. In this particular case, it looks to me like the camera focused on the green leaves beyond the yellow blossom rather than on the yellow blossom. That probably wasn't the look you were looking for, was it, Sue?
That's true.
Okay.
I wasn't looking beyond the flower.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. This was also bright daylight. This was early evening, late afternoon, depending on how you look at it these days. This was at about 7 in the afternoon, 7 in the evening.
And
5, 6, 7. So
people
it's the
should be able
warmer
to
light
notice
and
that
Go
the
ahead.
light is coming from a much lower angle here. That's what the late afternoon accomplishes. Instead of the light coming largely from above, it's coming to a great degree from the left-hand side. It's a different look. Go ahead.
okay. This is another little patch of flowers. Again, morning, sun high overhead, and later in the afternoon, in the evening. Morning, midday, and evening. You can't really see the difference in the light there, though you can tell from the shadows of the
Okay.
petals.
Sue, alternate a couple of times between this picture and the previous one, and group, tell me what's noticeably different between this picture and this one.
I think that this is the picture that was taken at noon.
Midday.
Midday, yes, midday. My experience, so I avoid midday pictures, although sometimes you can't avoid it, is that to me, the light sometimes can be harsh. Unlike the next picture where I think there's a much softer effect of the light, and therefore I can see, now of course this is also a bigger picture, greater detail. So, but sometimes it's unavoidable to shoot at, you know, midday if you're traveling and you're in some spot. You just need to take some, you know, capture, make some memories. So you just do it. But it's harder later on to fully appreciate it.
What
From
I was actually,
in my experience.
yeah, that's a very good point. What I was getting at actually is the difference in how the background looks between this picture and the other one.
Mm-hmm.
What do you notice about the background here versus the other one, guys?
This one is busy.
Yeah.
Right, because the background is in relatively sharp focus. You know, certainly the blossom is in really sharp focus, and the green leaves above and to the right are a little bit out of focus, but still enough in focus that you see a lot of their structure. Go back to the other picture, please, Sue. The background here is a very soft pastel blur.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see any anatomic structure to the leaves in the background.
Yes.
Now, the way that happened is that Sue got very much closer to the blossom, and everything else equal, if you're really close to your subject and your background is still the same distance away, your background will get further out of focus because go ahead, Sue.
This is a different flower and the background is quite a lot farther away.
Okay, fair enough. What I was getting at is that the ratio of the distance to the subject against the distance to the background will determine how much difference in sharpness of focus there is. If the background is tucked right behind the subject, you know, say the subject is 5 feet away and the background is 6 feet away, then they're both going to be in very similar focus. Whereas if the subject is 1 foot away and the background is 6 feet away, I think I got the numbers about the same there for subject to background distance. That ratio means that the subject will be in much, much sharper focus than the background.
Okay.
Am I getting across?
Yeah, so
that?
question, Rick. If
Go
you're
ahead, Maria.
in auto, will your camera adjust?
Well, your camera is going to try to figure out what the subject is and try to focus on the subject. In the case of flowers, these cameras are really quite good at figuring out that the flower is the subject. Sue did have one example I pointed out a couple minutes ago where the camera was focused on the leaves beyond the flower, but that isn't happening very often. The camera doesn't really know your intent for whether the background should be in sharp focus or whether you want the background to be blurry, like in this shot. But what she did in this case was she moved much closer to the subject, which had one big effect, that the subject is much more dominant in terms of the area of the image. But it had a second effect, which is that the difference in distance from the camera to the subject versus the camera to the background is much greater in this picture than in the other picture.
Okay.
And that difference in background distance versus subject distance is what causes this picture to have a much blurrier background. There are other ways you could get the background blurry, but one of the ways you can do it is to make sure that the ratio of distance to the subject from the camera to the distance to the background from the camera is a large ratio, and that will get the background out of focus.
Okay.
Now, whether you want the background out of focus or not is your personal artistic decision. But for me, this picture, even though it does a great job of capturing a very pretty blossom with lots of color and detail and so on, from my particular viewpoint, the one with all the detail in the background is trying to compete for your attention, and it makes it a weaker image. That's just my opinion. Okay, thank you, Sue.
And that's another picture from, I think from this morning. Again, the leaves to the left of the flowers got more focus than the flowers themselves, but I did kind of like the background. And this one was an accident. As I was turning to go into the house, I looked over my shoulder at our magnolia tree, and this guy was just crying out to be photographed.
Beautiful.
So I did.
Yeah, I think Sue got a really, really nice picture here.
It's beautiful.
I did have to go in and pull out a branch that had been pruned from another tree and was hanging off in the left. But
That is a good thing to do, Sue. It is perfectly
I might have
legitimate
taken out that brown leaf in the upper right too, but
to move the distracting item before you take the picture. This takes advantage of the soft and diffuse light from having that high cloud cover this morning. If you went out and took this shot again right now with the sun out, it would not have this kind of soft, I just want to rub it against my cheek kind of quality. Does that make sense to the group?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. This is different shade of white. Yeah.
I meant to be sticking to my yellow flowers and my red roses, but I couldn't help myself.
Okay, this is the banana tree I took 6-ish in the morning a few days ago.
Okay.
And it was a cloud, is a high cloud, is very groom picture. And this is a close up. This is from a little bit another angle, lowered angle. This is all taken in early in the morning when the cloud cover. And then this is afternoon, about 3-ish. You can see the sunlight, I think, is from the back. This is photoing toward the east. This is a kind of a blow up of that afternoon sunlight. This is the same time, but I changed the angle, kind of a photo toward a little bit westward and southward, so you can see the light showing a different way.
Right.
And this is the evening, like 7-ish, almost 8 o'clock, sundown, and you can see a little pinkish color on the entire picture because of the sundown.
Exactly.
So, so that's all I have here. I was using my cell phone, and I don't know how to focus. I try to shoot some flower close by, but I just can't focus the center. Even though I tapped the little circle in the middle, it doesn't center very well. So all I did was this kind of picture is automatic. I just changed the direction a little bit, and so I don't think it's anything artistic, pretty, other than just recording the light at that location. And I can't avoid all the background other than take it real close.
That was the assignment, is just look at the different kinds of light. And
Anyone wants to comment on any particular one, I can move around.
I found it generally frustrating that this time of year, Southern California doesn't have good afternoon, evening light. Unless you've
Yeah.
got a fire going and that fire
Right.
burning someplace, and then you get sunset color.
It depends on the geography of your neighborhood too. Sue and I live in a home where the terrain goes up quite sharply to the west of us. So in our yard, we don't generally get the really warm sunset light because the sun disappears behind the houses to the west of us when it's still a long ways above the horizon. But
The one that you just moved off of is a really good example of using the bright midday light to accent the leaves.
yeah, the light and dark areas on the leaves do make for compositional interest in this one. And, you know, that's what we were looking to see in this assignment. That the same banana tree can look very different with the light from different directions and different times of day. Okay.
All right, thank you. All right.
Okay, we see them.
How cute.
Now, these little guys, they don't, but is that I don't have them well in focus? They're under a roof, so it's not like they're going to get sunshine like crazy.
Yeah, I think that the branch that is just below and to the left of the birds is in sharper focus than they are, I think.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
And we could spend a lot of time talking about how to convince your autofocus to be focused on the subject you want. What would I say in a brief statement? It's dependent on your camera what you can do to convince the camera to focus differently. If the
What kind of a
subject
camera
is,
is this, Bonnie?
Pardon me?
What kind of camera is this?
It's a Canon EOS or E something.
okay, so a Rebel or
Yeah, Rebel. Thank you.
okay, all right. So in general, if you compose the subject somewhat off center, which when we talk about composition, I'm going to ask you to do a lot of the time, then a basic trick for getting the subject in focus is to temporarily point the camera with the subject in the middle, because the camera likes in general to focus on what's in the middle. Press the shutter button halfway down and that will cause it to find focus. Leave the shutter button halfway down, swing the camera to get the composition that you want with the shutter button still halfway down. And now when the composition is what you want, push the shutter button the rest of the way. The focus should stay on the thing that was in the middle when you press the button halfway down. In this case, that's not the solution because the subject is in the middle and it still didn't focus on it. So technique number one didn't get the problem solved in this case. In this case, taking several pictures and hoping that the camera focuses on what you want at least one time would be the primary low-tech solution.
Yeah, I can see that the birds are never in focus on any of these pictures.
Okay. You can manual focus. You know, your Rebel does have an autofocus manual focus switch on the lens barrel. It's AF/MF.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you put it into MF, then you can twist the focus ring on the lens until the birds are in sharp focus and then take your shot. That's a very legitimate solution on a camera that offers a friendly manual focus system like your Rebel does.
Have you ever heard of a hummingbird sitting still long enough for
That's quite remarkable.
Amazing that you're able to do it.
Yeah, that's quite remarkable.
Because they're moving all the time, flying all the
every
time.
second? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So the reason, excuse me, the reason they're not sharp, like their wings, you don't see feathers, all of that has to do with just not being focused right on the button.
Right.
Yeah, another way that you could get not sharp would be if the shutter speed that the camera picked was relatively slow and the birds or the camera moved while the exposure was being made. But I don't think that's the case here. If you had motion while the exposure was being made, there would be how do I describe it? A consistent ghost path
Yeah.
to the moving objects in the
Okay.
image. You know, I'm sure you've seen, say, a picture of point lights in really dark light, and the camera shake caused there to be a pattern traced in the image of the way the camera shook while the shutter was open. And all of the point lights in the image show that same pattern because they were sitting still and the camera shook in one particular pattern.
Yeah.
I don't see any of that camera shook kind of look to the softness of the birds here. And that's why I say that I think it is that they are not in perfect focus.
Okay. Thank you. It's
The
been
thing
so
that-
frustrating for me.
Oh.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, no,
A thing that I've had to learn about the autofocus on my camera is that I can't rush it. If I see the picture, if I see something to take a picture of and just jab the shutter, it's not going to have time to focus on the thing that it thinks is appropriate. I have to push it halfway down, let it settle, and then push it the rest of the way.
that's a very good point, Sue. And it might
Thank
really
you.
have solved this situation for Bonnie if she held the shutter button down halfway for a bit before pressing it the rest of the way. The camera will give a focus completion indication to you. It can be either a dot at the edge of the viewfinder display, or it can be a little sound that the camera makes when it completes focusing.
Really?
And there's
I didn't
a
know that.
choice in the camera's menu to be, what is it? I think it's focus priority, where you can, in the menus, tell the camera, when I press the shutter all the way down, take the picture right now because I want the moment when the bird's beak is wide open. And I'm willing to tolerate that it might not be perfectly focused because it's too fast for the camera to capture the focus. Or there's another choice on that setting of focus priority, where you tell the camera,
That was what
I'm willing.
you said focus before.
One of them says, wait to take the picture until you get focus lock. The other one says, take the picture immediately on pressing the shutter all the way down.
Gotcha.
The
I'm sorry.
wording for it can vary from camera menu to camera menu. I believe the one where it waits until it's got the focus correct is called focus priority on the cameras. The other one is shoot it right now or something to that effect. I forget the wording.
Okay,
And it'll vary from camera to camera.
I'll have to
But
look for that.
But then
You
it might
can-
focus on the branch rather than on the bird.
Yeah.
that is a
might-
possibility.
Yeah.
But, you know, say for a bird in flight picture, which is what I'm trying to teach myself to do, the don't take the picture until you've got yourself convinced you're in focus will usually result in a picture of blue sky after the bird has flown away. So you need to take the picture when the shutter button is pressed all the way down, even if the camera hasn't convinced itself to focus. One of the differences between this model of camera and that model of camera, particularly with a particular lens mounted on the camera, is that some combinations will focus faster than others. More expensive, bigger, heavier cameras will usually have faster and more reliable focus speed. So the small camera that Sue uses is a wonderful camera. She's taken a lot of great pictures with it. But when trying to focus on fast moving subjects, it's not as photographer friendly as the camera that I use that's bigger and heavier and more expensive. That's a trade-off. Does that mean you guys should all go spend your whole bank account on big, heavy, expensive cameras that have blindingly fast focus? No. It's just part of, you give a little, you get a little, choices that you make in what camera and lens you buy and use.
Another thing about focus, and this is maybe on other cameras, but it's definitely on mine. I can have it picking a focal point, a thing to focus on from basically the whole image or smaller and smaller parts of that image. So that if I have it trying to focus on the whole image, it'll say, oh, look, there's a nice diagonal sharp line. I'll take that, even if it's not right in the middle. Whereas if I've narrowed it down so that it's focusing on one spot, I can do that trick that Rick was suggesting of put that spot on the thing that I really want to have in focus, and then push the shutter down halfway, recompose the image, and the thing will stay in focus. So it's every different camera has its different tricks.
Yeah, we could spend multiple meetings of the class talking about techniques for focus. And it's a really interesting subject, but I think we're going to back off from it for the moment. I think what I want to do at the moment is to introduce you to your next homework assignment. And I'm going to do that by moving into the next room over and using my iPhone to do it. Okay, let's see. The homework assignment for next week is to take a few objects that you can manipulate from your home. In my case here, I picked some pieces of stained glass that Sue and I made, and a couple of trivets on the dining room table, and play with making them into a still life composition, several different compositions. So, for example, here is a high angle that shows so that's one picture. Okay, now I'm going to take the same objects and I'm going to make a different composition. I'm going to get at a lower angle. Do that. Okay, now, but I need to get the kitchen out of the picture again. So here I'm going to go to a horizontal composition.
Yes, one of the lessons we're learning from Zoom is how to rearrange our backgrounds.
Now, just to make a point, if I wanted to focus on the blue coaster at the top right, on the iPhone, all I have to do is touch it and the focus goes there. Whereas if I want to focus on the guy with the red splotch, that moved the focus. So just touching the spot on the screen will move the focus to that place. But that's different on a camera that doesn't have a touch screen. But here is different composition. Okay, now let's see. Let's arrange things a little differently. Another shot. I could spend a bunch of time playing with these objects, but what I want you to do is find some objects and move them around in different relationship to each other, change the point of view of the camera, and try to come up with several different still life compositions. Does that assignment make any sense, guys?
So the assignment is to take,
A still life of several objects, doesn't matter, you can choose the objects yourself. Try arranging them differently, changing the angle you're shooting from, just to get a different composition. Get something that appeals to you as a pleasing arrangement of the objects together with each other.
okay, thank you.
All right. We have 8 minutes. I want to just introduce you to one more resource that's really valuable in learning how to improve your photography. So that is photography courses on LinkedIn Learning, which used to be called lynda.com. Have any of you already heard about lynda.com or LinkedIn Learning?
No,
Okay,
No, is it
no.
lynda.com?
It's not called Lynda anymore. The name used to be lynda.com, but the company was bought by the company LinkedIn, which you might have heard of as a business
Mhm.
equivalent to Facebook, people to
Yeah.
share each other's
Yeah.
job skills and such. LinkedIn bought Lynda, but they have about 5,000 professionally produced online courses, mostly on subjects having to do with technology, computers, but they have a lot of stuff on photography. And I'm going to, you can have free access to LinkedIn Learning by being an OLLI member. You just need to, well, let me illustrate it.
Okay, and the URL is all one word, linkedinlearning.com.
All right, so this is a web browser screen. You can use the web browser of your choice. Go into the address and choose fullerton.edu. In my case, as soon as I typed an F, it assumed that. You might have to type in the whole fullerton.edu. Once it's showing fullerton.edu, hit the return key. This is Cal State Fullerton's homepage. Can everybody see this on screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. We're students, so we're going to click on the student portal button here at the top left. Okay. Now, you need to sign in to your Cal State Fullerton username and password. You guys probably did that to get to Zoom. If you don't have
Maybe.
your Cal State Fullerton username and password, we'll talk with you one-on-one after the class is over. But my Cal State Fullerton username is Hearn, and I've just typed in my password. Okay, this is my personal homepage for Cal State Fullerton. You have one as well. And you'll notice in the apps area that one of the apps is LinkedIn Learning. Okay, so I've clicked on that LinkedIn Learning in the apps section of my personal portal. Now there's a large blue button here, log on to LinkedIn Learning. Okay, notice it says formerly lynda.com. I'm going to click on that log on to LinkedIn Learning button. Now, if you've never been on LinkedIn Learning before, or Lynda, you're going to have to answer a couple questions about your birthday or something to create your account there. I already have an account, so I didn't get put through that. I'm now at the top level page for me for LinkedIn Learning, and I've already picked a couple of courses, so I'm just going to play one of them just to illustrate to you what we can do here. So this is an introduction to photography class by a guy named Ben Long.
There are a lot of complex parts in a camera, but one of the most critical components is the lens. It's the lens that focuses the light from your scene onto the image sensor in your camera, and different lenses will do a better or worse job of focusing that light. A superior lens will yield an image with sharper details, better contrast, richer colors. Also, sometimes a lens just has an indefinable quality that you might prefer, even if you can't identify exactly why. But image quality is not the only thing that separates one lens from another.
Okay, I'm not actually going to show you the whole lesson because we don't have the time, but you can see here that I can go backwards or forwards 10 seconds. I can the slider. This is just like YouTube or any other video player. So if I wanted to move the slider backwards, I can watch the same thing again.
Job of focusing that light. A superior lens will yield an image.
Or I can drag it forwards to skip ahead to later. Come on, do it, sucker. There we go. And hit play again. Come on, you can do it, sucker.
That is normal. A lens with a focal length that is shorter than a normal lens.
On the left-hand side of the screen, you see a navigation panel for this course, all of the different lessons in it. The lessons are mostly just a couple, 3 minutes, 4 minutes long. So you can do it in little bitty bits and pieces, but you can skip around and watch only the portion that you want. You can rewatch things, etc. Anyhow, I haven't shown you how to search for courses on Lynda yet. We don't have much time. I just wanted to give you a taste that if you want to learn about different things about photography, there are over 100 photography courses available on LinkedIn Learning, and it's all free for you as long as you're an OLLI member and you know your Cal State Fullerton username and password. So that's just a taste, but we'll revisit this in future weeks. Your homework assignment for next week is to do a still life with several objects from your home. Try different arrangements of the objects, camera in different position, light source in different position, etc. Does everybody think they can handle that?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Sure.
All right.